Well, here we are once again, folks. I'm your less than humble host, Wild Bill of the Wild Bill fame. And folks, last night, Stanley County Board of Education had their usual monthly meeting, whereas per usual, the public would be able to comment. Now, I'm going to tell you, the rules for public comment, in my less than humble opinion, these rules are quite absurd. Okay, basically you have 3 minutes to articulate your position and convey your message to the board. Okay, you got comments only go for 15 minutes. All right, yet they can have closed sessions in their board meetings, and that just, that can go on for as long as they think it needs to. Right, but you got 3 minutes to articulate your position and convey it to the board. Now, with every other board, or like every other board across the country, the Stanley County School Board does not like hearing negative criticism, nor do they like being called out for the things that they're doing. And last night, the board got 2 barrels of criticism and calling out. The issue this time was over the playground at Millingport Elementary, and how the people and the parents of Millingport were going to have a community fundraiser to restore this playground. Okay, the playground is in terrible shape, folks. Now, the Board of Education, with this school and others, have neglected these playgrounds for years at these smaller schools, and there's a reason for this, folks. I know what the reason is, and if you think about it, I think you know what the reason is too. Okay, especially those of you who still ask about Ridgecrest. And while the board throws out their pig Latin numbers and speaks to what is essentially an excuse, we don't have the money, right? No effort really is being made to find new ways to maintain our failing schools. Now, last night, to be fair, they did indicate that at least one school was in the proposed budget for next year, I think it was, to have their playground addressed. But, their excuse is we can't do everything all at once, yada, yada, yada. Well, we're talking about years, folks, okay? And there's a reason why it's gone on for years, okay? And there's a reason why some schools are getting new playgrounds and others are not, So, while they make it their excuses and everything, this board consistently does the stupid things and wastes your money in endeavors that the people never voted for, nor did they even have a say in what this board's doing. And that's because this board is working behind the people's backs to realize their vision of school consolidation and the eradication of community-based schools. It's almost like their concerted efforts to see to this will see to the destruction of not only the small schools, but small towns themselves. So, yours truly, your less than humble host, spoke at this board meeting, and I let him have at least 1 barrel, okay? Now, I didn't get to finish my comments. I was about a paragraph away from finishing, but I didn't get to finish because they adhered to this ridiculous 3-minute rule, okay, where they only had to endure 3 minutes of pain and criticism, and then, when all the speakers are done, they can continue to dazzle us with their bullshit, And let me tell you, if you try to finish your comment, the board calls the sheriff's department, and you got 3 deputies that show up, okay? In my mind, and I think in a lot of people's minds, not everybody's, I think this is an attempt to intimidate the people into sitting down and shutting up, and to prevent or discourage people from showing up in future meetings, okay? And because they're so damn afraid of criticism, and they're afraid that if the people take a stand against their ridiculous and irresponsible actions, that things are going to get ugly. So they stopped me at the 3 minutes, and I almost thought about bulldozing right on through, but I didn't want to have the board shut down public comment or delay it before Mrs. Hannah Chavez-Lear, who's a parent out of Millingport. I didn't want to shut anything down or delay anything or cause a ruckus before she got to speak. And speak she did, folks. Her comment maybe would have taken about 5 minutes. Mine would have ended at 4. okay? But of course, the board shut her comment down, or tried to, before she was able to finish, you know? Of course, it was after that we saw the deputies come in, you know, as well as the school board security person who happens to live in Locust, from what I understand. They called this person to come into Locust. My God, the Hottentots are coming, you know? I can't remember her name right now, but she lives in Locust, from what I understand. So they call all these people in because they didn't like the way these comments were going, and people were attempting to go over the 3 minutes to convey their concern in earnest to this board. Well, the board has no interest in that, okay? So they call in the cavalry, and they shut everybody down after their 3 minutes. Folks, I'm going to tell you, if you're going to get your point across, you've got to show up in numbers, okay? And this board's going to continue to act adverse of your determined will, your needs, your desire for your community-based schools. They're going to work against that. They're going to lie to you about it, and then they're going to drive on, okay? You got to make your voices heard. So we need to speak out for this. Now, look, I know election season is still a ways out there, okay? But, we have to know what's going on if we're going to make sound decisions on what we want from our representatives, what we want in our school systems, and who we want to represent our concerns and aspirations, okay? And it begins with your voice, folks. So Ms. Lear and I launched this shot over the bow, and I'm going to tell you, folks, like I said, we're going to need you sooner than later. I can just feel it, okay? But I didn't get to finish my comment, and so here in this video, I figured that I would render to you my righteous rhetoric for your review, okay? And think on it. Decide for yourself what you think, okay? But in my less than humble opinion, you have a right to know what people are talking about, and you certainly have a right to know what your school board is doing behind your backs and how irresponsible they're being and how irresponsible they've been. So without further delay and without further ado, the entire comment that I wish to make at the school board meeting on April 1st, 2025. It's entitled, "The Problem with Little Tyrants and Corruption." Now, this thing about public comment, let me just make one thing clear here. Public comment before the closed session, in my humble opinion here, less than humble, the people shouldn't be kept waiting for almost the entirety of the meeting before getting to speak on the issues that they care about, okay? In other words, shouldn't the people have the consideration to speak and put their concerns first and foremost before this board goes into closed session? Furthermore, I would suggest that the current 3-minute rule for speaking is woefully inadequate for any member of the public to articulate and convey any of their concerns that they're going to have, okay? But this rule setup is advantageous to the board to endure a certain number of speakers for a minimal amount of time so they can avoid the people altogether by the rule which discourages people from speaking in the first place. Now, onward to what I spoke to there at the board meeting in its entirety. The Stanley County Board of Education has betrayed the public trust by holding meetings, making decisions that affect the tax-paying public in closed sessions, bypassing the express will of the people with regard to redistricting and a community school system. Every hardship, from the teacher issues to the bus issues to the overcrowding of schools and transportation and time issues for families, are being brought to you by a Board of Education that has worked in its own interest and have bypassed the public input and ignored the expressed and determined will of the people to reinstate a community-based education system in Stanley County. Recently, the people of Stanley County in Millingport were having a fundraiser to raise money for the upgrade of their community school playground. It has come to the attention of the people that an effort led by specific members of the board and represented by the superintendent was initially effected to persuade the principal of that school into shutting down the event, not allowing flyers to be put out, and shutting down the event entirely. When confronted on this, the superintendent was forced to relent, and the fundraiser would proceed. Now, there are two clear indications here. One, that the community wants their community-based schools to continue and thrive, and two, that the board is intent on resisting this and is working against the people of the community by attempting to persuade a principal to deny and actively withholding taxpayer revenue from maintaining something as fundamental as a playground whereby children, and specifically handicapped children, are unable to even access this playground. This is a clear violation of the American Disabilities Act, and yet this board is able to find the funds to purchase an administrative office with taxpayer money that ought to be directed toward the community-based school system that the people absolutely want. The intent to shut down the fundraiser was attempted because when the people rally together and apply their money and their effort and their energy to maintaining and upgrading something as simple as a playground, the people become attached to their community schools. And this is something that the school board absolutely does not want. By not prioritizing a playground and attempting to shut the fundraiser down, the clear intent here is to discourage the people from becoming attached to their community schools. And the intent is to manipulate things so that the Board of Education can continue with their real objective of school consolidation, and in some cases, favoritism towards certain schools that they have a personal interest in. This is something that the people of Stanley County never supported. They never voted for any of this. And we know this because of the overwhelming support that we get when you talk about reopening schools like Ridgecrest. So the Board of Education purchases this central office, okay, to the tune of $1 million, okay? And the kicker here is there's a loan that's also attached to this property, okay, that the Board of Education and ultimately you are responsible for. You're accountable to it. You have to pay for it. Not only did the Board of Education use taxpayer funds out of the capital account to buy this office, but the Board of Education is paying on this loan for this location for about 15 or 20 years using taxpayer money to do it. And yet, the Board of Education won't apply the existing funding that they have for Millingport's playgrounds, even if it's just to be in compliance of the American Disabilities Act. You know, you go back years and they didn't even think about these things, right? Because they know what they want to do, all right? They're going to make like we're working on it now. We're going to get it into the budget next year. We might be able to do something this year, but folks, this has been going on for years and there's a reason for this, okay? I go on. This is the financial taxpayer money malfeasance of the highest order. It's corrupt to the core. In effect, this is the board members and the superintendent who have decided to take the people's voice away, to act as little tyrants who at a whim decided that the people who elected them deserve no say in how they're governed or how their children in schools are managed. And apparently, the parents and people have zero say in the kinds of school systems that they want or need. The tyrants have already decided for you. This is a system that decidedly does not work for the people of the county. And this board better start paying attention. It's time to reverse course, folks. The people have their voice, and in due time, they're going to use it. So, that is the speech, the comment that I wanted to render in its entirety. I got through most of it. But like I said, that 3-minute rule, it's ridiculous, but it's also set up in a way that discourages people from speaking in the first place. Now, we had other speakers beside Ms. Lear and I, and they were good. They were a little bit more forgiving than Ms. Lear and I were. But when we talk about, the people, when we say we want to work with our school board and find solutions to the things that we need and to the things that we want for our school systems, when we talk about working together, I'm going to tell you right now, all of that just goes in one ear and out the other. And what they're doing, in effect, is basically affecting their own will and their own interest ignoring your will and your interest, okay? And they justify doing this by saying we ain't got the money, okay? Well, they absolutely have had the money. They still have money. They're going to get money. We're going to have to find new ways to acquire the budgets that we need for our school system, and we're going to have to learn how to spend taxpayer money smartly, which we haven't been doing that for decades. So, let me know what you think, folks. I'm going to speak to this issue in my next episode of the podcast, The Last Stand with Wild Bill. You can find me on Spotify or anywhere you find your podcast episodes. You can go everywhere. There's actually a few. They're like Spotify's one of them. Apple's another. There's one called Podbean. I ain't never heard of it. But wherever you find your podcast, folks, just look forward to the next episode. I'm going to talk about this. And I'm going to reiterate some of the things that this Board of Education has been doing behind your back and how stupidly they have been spending your money and the lies that they're telling you about what it is that they're trying to do. When you see pictures of school board members at schools, certain schools, right? And it's only a few. When you see board members at schools and they're taking all these cute pictures and everything like that, yeah, I get it. You got to go to your schools. You got to interact. But I'm telling you, folks, the unicorns, the rainbows, and the sparkles, that's not even close. The puff pieces and all of this cutesy stuff that the school board does to show their support for schools, and I'm sure they do support their schools. All that's fine and well, but I can tell you, and I can see it, they're not what they make themselves out to be. They're not listening to you. And if we allow school boards and government officials and entities to continue to do the things that they do, we're going to be in a situation where we can't turn the boat around. Okay? If you want your community-based schools, if you want Ridgecrest to be a school for the people of the community, if you want your schools to be well taken care of, you've got to voice your concern on this, and you've got to make your determined will known. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to do what they always do, and that's just go behind your back and do things that are decidedly adverse to what it is you want for your communities. That's what this boils down to. So, look forward to the next episode of the Last Stand podcast with your less than humble host, Wild Bill. I'm going to be talking about this, and I hope you will be too. See you next time, folks.